why the UK never wins Eurovision anymore. So in this video, we're going to look at why the UK hasn't won Eurovision since 1998. I'll be looking at it from 3 angles. Why Eurovision isn't suitable for the UK, why the UK isn't suited to Eurovision, and lastly, we'll break down the songs themselves and see what's popular today. But we'll start with a history lesson. Believe it or not, the UK is one of the most successful countries to compete in the contest. Up until 1998, we only finished twice outside the top 10. We've won 5 times. Sandie Shaw with Puppet on a String in 1967. Lulu with Boom Bang a Bang in 1969.
Come closer and listen. The beat of my heart keeps on missing. I notice it most when we're kissing. Come closer and love me tonight. That's right. Come closer and cuddle me tight. My
Brotherhood of Man with Save Your Kisses for Me in 1976.
Though it hurts to go away, it's impossible to stay. But there's one thing I must say before I go. I love you. I love you. You know, I'll be thinking of you in most everything I do. Now the time is moving on, and I really should be gone, but you keep me hanging on for one more smile. I love you. I love you. For a while. In a cute little way, will you promise that you'll say your kisses for me? Save all your kisses for me. Bye-bye, baby, bye-bye. Don't cry, honey, don't cry. Walk out the door, but I'll soon be back for more.
Bucks Fizz with Making Your Mind Up in 1981. And Love Shine a Light by Katrina and the Waves in 1997.
Shine a light in every corner of my heart. Let the love light carry. Let the love light carry. Light up the magic in every little part. Let our love shine a light in every corner of our hearts.
So what happened after 1998? Well, in 1999, the rules were changed that songs didn't have to be performed in their native language, and since, we've only finished in the top 10 twice.
Jessica Garlick to sing for the UK. Let's cheer her on with word and gesture. Mind you, her frock's been through the shredder.
With Jessica Garlick in 2002, who finished 3rd.
We both made the same mistakes. And believe me, I know it. I've come to depend on you. In my eyes, can you see that someone's still hurting me? What can I say that will make up for letting you down? I just want you to know, so come back.
And with Jade Ewen in 2009, who finished 5th.
I've been down so long, but those days are gone now. I've got the will, I've earned the right
But hang on a minute. It has to be more than just English language thing. Songs are so much more than just lyrics. They're a beat, a melody, a genre, personality, and the performance itself. We know that televised singing competitions such as Britain's Got Talent or X Factor tend to surround the performance with massive amounts of backstory and interviews and editing and some more build-up, and then and only then do we get to see a highly edited version of what they did with a few scripted reaction shots. But Eurovision is different. We're introduced to the act pretty much as soon as they go up on stage, and then we never see or hear them again. But now we have the internet, so acts which do well in the semi-finals can get a bit more attention than they used to, and that puts the UK at a disadvantage, being a country that doesn't compete in the semi-finals as part of the Big Five. Europop also has its own culture that Britain isn't really part of or a fan of. Here we prefer grime, punk, and making our own unique sounds, and our artists are world-renowned, while European artists struggle to get the same kind of exposure. So why don't we send somebody really famous to Eurovision? Well, we have recently sent Bonnie Tyler and Engelbert Humperdinck, who didn't do very well. But in the past we've sent Blue, Katrina and the Waves, Cliff Richard, and Olivia Newton-John, all with varying degrees of success. Artists were more likely to have a go in the early days because there were less countries, meaning less risk, and they were more likely to win. Now it seems to be left to just artists who want to revamp their careers. But it goes deeper than that. Is Eurovision really serious? I mean, is it? The point in Eurovision was to bring countries together after the war through song, but it's become full of gimmicky, jokey, novelty acts. The voting tends to be for neighbouring allies, hence why the jury vote was introduced, and hardly any winner makes a memorable, world-dominating career afterwards. It's very easy to forget what happens. It's a party, it's a gay pride event, it's a charitable concert, but it's not a way to make a career. It's a competition event made with challenges for acts to fail, so an Adele or Ed Sheeran isn't going to risk their livelihood on it. But an up-and-coming artist will take anything to establish some exposure. There are other ways to gain exposure in Britain, as it has a more established music scene than the rest of Europe. But I guess, if all else fails, Europe and Eurovision is still an option for artists. I just want to take this moment to mention one successful current artist who did enter an international competition recently. Jessie J entered a Chinese singing competition competing with other established artists. So why did she do that one and not Eurovision? Well, it's really about money. China is growing more rapidly than the UK, plus the show was shown all across Asia, and it's a bigger continent in terms of people and growth, therefore it makes sense to export to a bigger market. European countries, particularly most of those competing in Eurovision, tend to be less economically developed than the UK, therefore exposure isn't as sought after. It's also because Jessie J doesn't get along with the British media. Now, if America were to join Eurovision, I'm sure it would increase interest from artists. Europe faces many political battles, and uniting the continent on anything is becoming harder and harder. Sport, like the Olympics, is much easier to unite nations with because it tends to be fair game. Whoever wins, wins. But Eurovision is all about voting, so the opinions of countries about each other tend to come up, hence why Russia always gets booed. The UK has Brexit, yobbish junkery on holiday, and our many wars in the Middle East to contend with. Europe has gay rights, security and economic worries. It's hard this year for the UK to like the winner or like Europe in general on political grounds, when Israel isn't even in Europe, and just a few days after the win, deathly protests begun in next year's hosting city. So now we've talked about why Eurovision isn't suitable for the UK. Now let's explore why the UK isn't suitable for Eurovision. The UK enjoys the tradition of cynicism. Reality TV is becoming stale in our country, and we've become incredibly Eurosceptic. We tend to think of ourselves as the best nation given we're so economically developed, but really we are one of the most politically and economically divided nations in Europe. Our national broadcaster, the BBC, is funded through a licence fee, and because of that, they don't invest in anything which doesn't provide a public service. It's the BBC that needs to be examined. For years, it has given us a contestant, a performer who they choose because they believe it to be in the public interest to choose one and broadcast it. Even if they've given us a voting contest prior to the main event, they've chosen the shortlist. It's not like X Factor, which goes on for weeks before we get a winner. This only happens in one night, if it happens at all. But many people in the UK hate or lose interest in Eurovision anyway, so we end up with a half-assed approach where we just send someone up and hope for the best. When we make a thing of it and try, that's when we do well, but we rarely try. Then when we fail, the anti-BBC press and media jump on it and talk it down to start a talking point to sell more papers, but they also like attacking the BBC from time to time.
But the thing is, 24th out of 26, and we are major supporters of Eurovision in this country, I think financially as well. So why do we bother?
This year, many people here in the UK have made the comment that if we sent Ed Sheeran, the Beatles' Queen up, we still come last. But this simply isn't true and just reflects the kind of sheepish copy and paste commentary people like to make because we're so Eurosceptic. If we invest more, if we take it more seriously, we can make a good song with a good singer, we'd win. But we don't, therefore we don't win. If you think otherwise, you're just blinded by bias, not rationality. The UK doesn't take the competition seriously every year. We have Graham Norton making comedic jokes and people sending in tweets about their parties they're having. Not that I hate that, I think it's quite fun, but if we don't take it seriously enough, we'll never win. Stop making songs just for Eurovision, make them for a mass market as well. Explore those sounds that only we produce, make good music, and we can win. Easier said than done, of course. The difference between mass market music and Eurovision music is that modern Eurovision is set in an arena, so all the songs are built around arena-style performances, while records focus on sales first and touring post-success. When the attention is all about the arena, the staging, lighting, dancing, and costumes seem to play more of a prominent role than the music. A concert of a top-level artist is only attended by fans, so they don't have to care quite as much. But Eurovision is attended by everyone and televised across the world. This puts pressure on artists to be as generic, attention-seeking and superficial as possible, taking the attention away from the music. So we produce generic songs to try it. We focus on belting out good lyrics and forget about tempo, melody and harmony and all the other things that make pop music so popular. I believe we can produce something that's equally as popular for the mass market and as popular in Eurovision, and for it to do well in both platforms. Take the attention away from the venue and give it back to the star. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.
This is for me, say it for you. This is for me. So long, honey, so long. Hang on, baby.